Hey homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. I am out in the greenhouse today starting tomatoes. So let me show you how I start tomatoes and show you the varieties that I'm growing this year. Hopefully you'll be inspired to start your tomatoes from seed this year as well. Come join me. So this contraption that you see here is often called a dibbler. And it is a way to make marks in a tray for seeds without having to count out and do individual seeds. So very handy. These are just electrical wire covers. And then I space these out. This one is 48 and I have another one that I think is 72. So this one is 72 instead. It just depends on what kind of things I'm starting and how much room they need. And I'm going to be starting some tomatoes, and I want them to be fairly tight because I'm going to pot them up pretty quickly. And so this is how this works. You just line up, and I have lines on this to mark the edges of the tray. There we go. And so now I have 72 seed holes here without having to do that individually, which saves a ton of time. There's a lot of really good hacks for different ways that you can do labeling out of old blinds and things like that. They're all great. Honestly, I just buy a box of labels from Amazon that are blank. And then more importantly, this is a garden marker. Basically, it's a paint pen. This will not fade in the sun the way a Sharpie does. Don't use a Sharpie. You won't be able to read it by July. It'll completely fade. These are from Amazon. I'll put a link below. I buy them by the pack and I always use them. They're really great and they're not super expensive. And then I plan out ahead of time because otherwise it's really easy to forget some of the varieties that you bought. And so this is my list of tomatoes for this year and what I'm going to be doing. And so this helps me plan out my seeding trays. And then I also sell seedlings in the spring. And so on some of these that I know are going to be popular, I'm going to do some extra aside from what I just want. And then I also put 2 seeds in every hole. And that way I can plant one, sell one, and I'm covered if I've got something that isn't a great germinator. And then when I pot them up, I divide everything into individual pots. All right, I'm going to put you guys on time lapse so that you can see what I'm doing, but you don't have to do it in real time because that would be really boring. All right, last row. Thought I'd bring you back and tell you a little bit about my thoughts here. So I've got these holes. They're a little bit deep. The general rule of thumb is to plant your seeds about twice as deep as they are wide. Tomatoes are quite tiny, and so you don't want to plant these really deep or they're not going to come up. They're going to run out of energy before they're able to break the surface and start feeding themselves with sunshine. And so I'm filling in those holes just a little bit with my finger as I'm going along because they're a little too deep for what I need. And then I'm putting 2 seeds in each hole, but I'm trying not to have them be right on top of each other because if they're right on top of each other, those roots are going to be growing essentially around each other and they're going to be much harder to separate. And so if I can just get, you know, 1/4 of an inch between them, that really helps in terms of when I have to separate them later. And I can't remember, this is called Virginia Sweets, and I did grow it last year. It was a really large kind of multicolored orange, yellow, red, stripy tomato. It was delicious. And I can't remember if it was this or the Abe Lincoln that I had really terrible germination on, and I only got 1 or 2 seeds to start. So we'll see. Virginia Sweets was the better of the 2 in terms of flavor, so I'm starting with that. Dr. Whitey's or Witchy's. This was recommended by Jess at Roots and Refuge Farm. I grew it for the first time last year, really loved it. And so I'm gonna grow it again. Huge, big yellow tomato. And what I'm doing here, so there's 2 seeds in each hole. And then in some, I'm planting all 6 holes with the same variety. And in some, I'm just doing 3. So if there's a tag on the other side, that means I've done 3 of one and 3 of another variety. And since I'm consistently doing that pattern, I'm not marking on the tag that there's 3 in each hole. So potentially I could have, if I did 6, like Brandywine, I did 6, potentially I could have 12 plants here. I really only need 1 or 2 for my own use, but that's a really popular variety, and so I know I can sell it. The things that are a little more esoteric or new to me, I don't want to have a lot of them to try to sell because they're a harder sell. People are a little more hesitant on things they've never heard of. And if I've never grown it before myself, I can't really speak to how well it's going to grow here. And so I try to be a little more conservative on those. But yeah, so we've got full row of tomatillos, sun orange cherry tomato from Osborne Seeds, very expensive seed. I'm not doing a lot of these because I'm really not going to sell them. I'm just going to grow them for myself because, whew, crazy expensive. I might have a few extras, but we'll see. So sun orange cherry and sun red cherry from Osborne Seed. They were about $1 a seed, but they're supposed to be really good production tomatoes for cherry tomatoes. So I'm giving them a try. Gardener's Ecstasy Cherry. This is I'm looking for a new red cherry tomato, and so this was a new one to try. I was ordering, this was a seed company that was new to me this year. They had a pepper that I really wanted, and so I threw in some red cherry tomatoes as well. Tomados de Comoros, Spanish cherry tomato, another one that was recommended from that same company. Just giving it a try. People like red cherry tomatoes, so I'm doing a full row of each of those because I know those will sell. Black cherry, which I personally really love the flavor of, so I've got some of those. Chocolate Sprinkles cherry, which was a freebie seed pack, but it sounds fun, so I'm going to give those a try. A yellow cherry cross and a red cherry cross. I had a sun gold cherry tomato cross with a German pink big beefsteak tomato. I saved the seeds from the beefsteak tomato, and when I grew them out, they were all cherries. So tomatoes will sometimes cross, particularly the old heirloom varieties. The flower is a little more promiscuous, and so you're more likely to see that. And so this is just an experiment where I've been growing these out from that cross every year, and I sell them at a discount because they're not a known variety, but it was really fun, and they're a great tasting tomato. Some ground cherries, which are different from tomatoes, but really fun. And maybe this is going to be the year that I'm going to figure out how to harvest them efficiently so that I can actually sell them. They sell quite well, but the labor on them to collect them is ridiculous. And so I don't end up usually selling very many because it takes me forever to pick them, and I can't really sell them at a profit. But I'm going to try some strategies this year and see if I can come up with something different. Iva's red berry cherry tomato. This was a freebie seed pack. I'm assuming by berry they're going to be really tiny. I'm not a huge fan of super tiny cherry tomatoes because labor-wise they take, 3 times as long to pick the same volume. But it was a free seed. Why not give it a try? It's always fun to try new things. Principisi Borghese. This is an Italian heirloom, slightly larger cherry tomato with a little point on the end. It's typically used in Italy for drying, but it has quite a following locally, and I sell these as their own separate clamshell of tomatoes, and I also dry a bunch every year. So I've been growing this for 15 years. I feel like it's just bad luck if I don't grow it, so I have to grow some of those every year. Brandywine we talked about. Cherokee Purple. Probably my favorite eating tomato in terms of flavor. It does not do well for me in terms of disease. It's the only tomato I have that I get a really lovely first flush of tomatoes, and then it's just garbage the rest of the season. They crack, they get blight, they rot. So not great for me production-wise, but I love the flavor, so I grow them every year because I can't resist, even though I know the plants aren't going to do super well or give me a ton. Paul Robeson, I grew that last year for the first time. Another dark purple tomato. Really lovely, really loved it. Definitely growing more of that this year. Anise Noir, also called pineapple tomato. It's a green and then variegated. Excellent, excellent tomato. Absolutely loved it last year. Definitely growing those again. Virginia Sweets, which I talked about, and then Dr. Whitey's. So this is this tray. What I also do at this point, I'm going to cover this with a little bit of additional soil and water it in, but I also take a photograph of this tray because sometimes these little tags fall off, they get lost, they fall over, and I don't know exactly where they were. And so taking a photograph of your tray of tomatoes at this point can save you a ton of angst later if for some reason your tags get displaced, so that you know exactly what is where. So highly recommend that. Just take a quick photo with your phone. Add a very, very light sprinkle of soil. And if I had some vermiculite, I would cover these with vermiculite instead. I'm out of vermiculite. I just ordered some from Amazon. Boy, has that ever gone up in price. It's way more expensive than it used to be. The last time I bought a bag, it lasted me 3 years, I think. And so I don't go through a lot of it because the only thing I use it for is covering seeds up, but it helps with damping off. So I'm just gonna hope for the best until I get that in. So you can see here, very, very light coating. Those seeds are tiny. They do not need to be buried deep. Give that a slight pat down, just so that when I water it, nothing moves. And that's it. That tray is done. It's sitting in another tray. Let's see if I can pick that up without messing everything up here. What I'm gonna do here is just empty out this bottom tray of any extra water that's in there. Actually, it looks dry, so we're good. I don't want that sitting in water. All right, first tomatoes of the season planted, yay. And I'm just gonna keep going. I'll bring you guys back when this tray is done and tell you what else I planted. All right, bringing you back here at the end. First half of this is tomatoes. The second half of this is peppers. Let's water this one in. I'm going a little heavier on this because I added a bunch of soil to the top and didn't water it in earlier. So tomato-wise, we have Valencia, which is kind of a medium-sized yellow tomato that's really delicious and that I've grown for many years. A great just all-purpose slicer and really popular because of the flavor. Mortgage Lifter and Canner Hole. And Canner Hole came from Seed Savers Exchange. It's kind of a medium-sized red tomato. I really like both Mortgage Lifter, Canner Hole, and also Brandywine for just all-purpose medium-sized, baseball-sized tomatoes. They're just delicious, and I dry a lot of them. So I slice them and dry them, and then I sell them as dried heirloom tomatoes later in the season. I did not realize until just as I was doing this that I didn't actually have any fresh commercial seed for either Mortgage Lifter or Canner Hole. I must have used it all up last year. Thankfully, I had saved seed from both of those varieties in a previous year, and so both of these are saved seed. And they're fairly old. I can't remember the year, but at least 4 or 5 years old. I find that tomato seed stores surprisingly well, and so we'll see what kind of germination we get on those, but I'm guessing it'll be more than 50%, even though they're older saved seed. Japanese black trifle. We did a tomato tasting out at one of the local farms last fall, and of all the different tomatoes that we tried, and I think there were over 30, this is the one that won the taste test. And so when I saw this as a variety to buy seed this year, I definitely jumped on it because it was just absolutely delicious. It's another one of those black tomatoes that are so good. And then Aunt Ruby's German Green. Not a lot of people love green tomatoes. They think of them as fried green tomatoes. A fried green tomato is not a ripe green tomato. A fried green tomato is a tomato that was picked unripe when it was still green and sliced and fried. That's a whole different thing. This is a variety that when it's ripe, it's still green. It turns kind of a pale yellow green instead. Absolutely delicious. Definitely one of my very favorite eating tomatoes. And it throws people off because they think green, they think it's not going to be flavorful or sweet. It is so good. It's definitely one of my favorite tomatoes. I've canned a lot of these because it's a quite prolific plant and the fruit is huge. And it always looks really weird on the shelf because you've got this kind of funny yellow tomato sauce. But it's absolutely delicious, worth growing for sure. San Marzano 2 from Johnny's. I normally plant San Marzano Ridorta from Seeds of Italy, but I haven't been able to get that seed for the last couple of years, and it's a fantastic San Marzano tomato. If I'm going to grow a paste tomato for sauce and salsa and that kind of thing that's a little bit drier, I want it to be large. because you have to peel those in order to can them, or at least you should, according to the experts. And so the larger the tomato, the less I'm peeling. If it's a small tomato, I'm going to be peeling a whole lot more tomatoes for the same volume. And so I want a big tomato. We'll see how the San Marzano 2 is from Johnny's. I haven't grown it before. And then I did have some saved seed from the San Marzano Redortas. And so that's the second row. So I have 2 rows here of San Marzanos from 2 different seeds. We'll see what we get in terms of germination, but usually quite prolific and tasty paste tomatoes. I don't know on this one. I'm hoping it's a larger variety. I'm pretty sure that's what the description said. Again, like the small little Roma paste tomatoes, I do not have the patience for that. They're way too small for what I want to do with them. So I want something that's big. And yes, I have tried Amish paste. I know a lot of people love Amish paste tomatoes. I've tried them in 3 different climates from 2 different seed sources. They do not do well for me. Why, but it's not a good variety for me. So if it works for you, fantastic, but has never worked well for me. I then have 2 rows of eggplants. One of them is called Rosa Bianca, and I grew that last year, a delicious kind of traditional Italian sized eggplant, but white with pink blushing. Very tasty. And then Littlefinger, which is a Japanese variety of eggplant. And I tried to grow this last year, and I don't know if I just messed up when I was planting the seed. When I planted about and saved some for myself, it was supposed to be 3 of each variety. And somehow I ended up with all Rosa Bianca. And so I don't know if I messed that up in the seed planting. Of course, there's no way to tell by looking at the plants until they start making fruit. But I tried to grow this last year and never got any actual fruit. There's been a lot of problems with the wrong seed being in the wrong packet. And so it's possible that it was just the wrong seed itself and it wasn't my fault, but unlikely because they all look like Rosa Bianca. So my guess is I just accidentally planted the same thing twice instead of switching seed packets. So 2 rows of eggplant, and then we move on to the peppers. And so I'm going to have a whole nother flat of peppers, but this is the start of it. Now I gotta go get my walk-in cooler ready so that I can actually put them in there. So this is my walk-in cooler. And we built it, there's a little shed, and we used the back half of the shed to turn this into a walk-in cooler. This is that wipeable plastic, I forget the name of it, I'll put it on the screen. And in the summertime, I use this as a cooler, obviously. We have a CoolBot. This is a CoolBot. And what a CoolBot does is it overrides the thermometer on an air conditioner so that you can actually get the cold all the way down into the 30s. Normally an air conditioner won't go that cold, but this overrides the thermostat so that you can go down into the 30s, and it turns this room into a cooler. The room is really well insulated, and because of that, it is fantastic for starting seedlings in the spring because it's so well insulated that I don't actually have to heat it. The only heat that is required is the heat that is coming off of these lights. And so right now it's 51 degrees in here. It was 48 a few minutes ago, and I've had the door open because I mopped this floor and so it was damp. And it's already gained a couple of degrees. So the heat off of these, and these are just LED grow lights. They came from Home Depot. I'll put a link below. I've always used shop lights, and I do have some shop lights on the bottom shelf here. That's a really cheap alternative, and it does work. Last year, I finally splurged and actually bought some actual grow lights, which was kind of fun. Those LED lights, they don't feel like they're putting out very much heat, but this is slightly warm to the touch. And when this room is closed, it is so well insulated that that's all that's needed. And this room, if I have all the lights on, will easily get to 80 degrees. So I'm gonna go get my recently seeded seed trays and bring them in here, and we're gonna start loading this puppy up. I do have humidity domes on these, which helps with holding in moisture so that the seeds germinate. You saw me water these. That's the last time I'm gonna water these for the next 4 or 5 days. This humidity dome is gonna keep that moisture in there. They do not need additional moisture. That pea moss that's in that seed starting mix is gonna hold on to that moisture really well. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're seed starting is overwatering. And it causes damping off, it causes algal growth, which really isn't that big of a deal, but it's kind of unsightly. And so don't overwater. Trust that there's enough moisture in there for those seeds to sprout. I live in fear, of course, of dropping one of these. And I've only done it once. A couple of years ago, I did drop an onion tray. And that is definitely a heartbreak. All right, that is probably all I'm gonna do for today. I have some other work I need to do on some of these grow lamps, but this is a good start, and I'll show you in the morning what the temperature is when we open it up. It's gonna be surprisingly warm. In my walk-in the next morning, and we are 66. So not quite up to, we're at room temperature, we're not quite up to pepper ideal germination temperatures, but that is in 12 hours when it got down to freezing last night. So that number is going to continue to climb a little bit, and I can always turn on a few more lights. I've got this bottom rack here is not on, and then I'm going to hang lights here that I don't have set up yet. So the other thing I can do is put a heat mat in here, and I have found that when I have a heat mat plus all the lights going, it's actually too hot. It runs 90 degrees or so. So that's an update for this morning, the day following all of the seedlings, or all of the seeds that we planted yesterday.